She cried holding two puppies in the blizzard, until a Navy SEAL and his K-9 found their way to hope the blizzard did not arrive like normal weather. It came like a living thing, hungry and fast, swallowing light, sound, and distance in one cold mouth. On Kestrel 9, storms were common, but this one was different. The colony's warning towers had screamed for hours before the signal lines went dead. The sky had turned from pale gray to hard white, and the air itself seemed to crackle with sharp energy. The people who still had power stayed inside, sealed behind thick doors. The people who were outside tried to get back. Not everyone made it. Mara Hale was outside. She moved through the whiteout like a shadow fighting a wall. Her boots sank into fresh snow, then hit hard ice, then sank again. Every step stole strength from her legs. The wind pushed against her chest and shoulders as if it wanted to throw her down and bury her. Her face mask was tight, and her breath sounded loud inside her helmet. Frost gathered at the edge of her visor, turning the world into a blurred, cruel dream. In her arms she held two puppies, small and shaking, wrapped inside her insulated field coat. Their bodies were warm against her, and that warmth was the only thing that kept her from feeling completely alone in the freezing dark. One puppy was sandy brown with a dark stripe along its back. The other was gray-white, almost the same color as the storm, which made Mara hold it tighter out of fear she might lose it if she let go even for a second. "These weren't supposed to be outside," she whispered, though nobody could hear her except the puppies. "You were supposed to be safe." The puppies were not normal animals. They were part of Mara's project, a rescue breed designed to survive harsh colony worlds. Their bodies could handle cold better than Earth dogs, their lungs could filter thin air, and their fur had special threads that could hold heat. They were meant to help humans, not suffer because of them. Mara had taken them out because she had no choice. Her research station had been a small place, built on a shallow ridge 2 kilometers from the main colony dome. It had power cells, lab equipment, and a little sleeping room. It was not strong enough for this storm. When the wind first hit, Mara had believed the station would hold. Then the ground had trembled, and a deep groaning had come from the metal walls, like a ship breaking apart in the ocean. The ridge itself had cracked. Snow and ice had slid down, and one side of the station had dropped. The lab room had shattered, glass and tools flying, lights blinking out one by one. Mara had grabbed what she could, a thermal pack, a locator beacon that was already failing, and the puppies, because they were alive and terrified because she could not leave them. She had barely escaped before the roof collapsed. Now she was walking without a clear direction. The map inside her wrist device kept freezing, then restarting. The compass spun in useless circles. Her beacon's light blinked weakly, like a dying heart. She tried to aim toward the main colony dome, but the storm turned her around again and again. Sometimes she thought she saw shapes ahead, buildings, rocks, maybe people, only to realize it was just snow moving in strange patterns. Her throat tightened. Tears formed, hot and painful, and then they cooled quickly against her cheeks. She did not want to cry. Crying wasted water. Crying was weakness, but she had been holding her fear for so long that it pushed out anyway. The brown puppy made a small sound, like a whine caught in its throat. The gray-white puppy pressed its face into her sleeve. "I know," Mara murmured. "I know. Just stay with me." She paused near a low rise of ice and tried to shelter behind it. The wind changed for a moment, giving her a breath of less pain. She looked down at the puppies. Their eyes were wide and glossy in the helmet light. She could feel their tiny hearts beating fast. Her mind kept showing her the same image. The station falling in slow motion, the lab lights flickering, her own hands shaking as she grabbed the puppies. She had worked for years to get this project approved. She had fought through committees, budgets, and cruel jokes from people who did not believe animals mattered. Now the project was 2 shivering lives in her arms, and she was not sure she could save them. The wind rose again, snapping at her like teeth. She forced herself to keep moving. Far above the storm, beyond the thick clouds, a small orbital shuttle had already failed. It had been a short flight, meant to drop supplies near the outer habitats before the storm hit. It should have returned hours ago. But the blizzard carried strong magnetic waves, and those waves did not care about human plans. They hit the shuttle's systems like a hammer. The engines coughed. The controls stuttered. The pilot fought to keep the nose up, but the world below was all white with no clean landing zone. Then the ship went down. It did not explode. It skidded across ice, tore through snow, and slammed into a ridge. Metal screamed. Lights died. For a moment, everything was silent except the wind. Inside, Lucas Kane unstrapped himself with careful hands. He did not panic. Panic was a luxury he could not afford. Kane was a Navy SEAL assigned to colony security and rescue response. He had trained for oceans, jungles, cities, and deserts. He had trained for space stations, too, because the Navy trained for everything. Still, Kestrel 9 had its own kind of danger. Cold could kill faster than bullets. His helmet light switched on. He checked the pilot first. The pilot was alive but unconscious, breathing shallowly. Kane checked the seat straps, then the emergency seal. The cabin pressure was dropping, but not too fast. Still, it would not last. He turned to the side and tapped a panel. A compartment opened with a hiss, and a large dog stepped out. Ranger moved with smooth control, paws quiet on the metal floor. His fur was thick and dark, and small pieces of tech were fitted along his harness and collar. A sensor unit rested at his shoulders like a folded wing. His eyes, sharp and calm, reflected the light like polished stone. Kane reached out and touched Ranger's head for a moment. It was not a soft touch. It was not a good boy moment. It was a check-in, a bond that did not need words. "We're down," Kane said through his helmet mic, though the comms were weak. "We're going to walk, find signal, find shelter, find people." Ranger's tail moved once, he understood. Kane opened the side hatch with effort. Snow tried to rush inside. The storm noise slammed into him. The world outside was bright white and violent. Kane stepped down into the snow, pulling a gear pack behind him. Ranger followed, body low against the wind. Kane looked back at the shuttle. It was broken but still standing, like a wounded animal. It would not protect them for long. The storm would bury it. The pilot could not be moved easily. Kane had to make a choice quickly. He set up a thermal shelter near the shuttle, wrapped the pilot in emergency heat sheets, and locked a beacon to the highest point he could reach. The beacon flashed, but Kane did not trust it. The storm would eat the signal. So he did what humans always did when machines failed. He trusted training and a dog. Kane clipped a line between his belt and Ranger's harness. The dog would lead when the wind was too strong, and Kane would hold when the ground was unsafe. Together, they stepped away from the wreck. Almost at once, the storm tried to erase them. Snow filled every space. The horizon vanished. Kane kept his steps steady. He counted in his head, matching breath to movement. Ranger's sensor unit clicked softly, reading heat and motion in layers Kane could not see. Minutes felt like hours. Then Ranger stopped. Kane froze instantly. He let the dog's body language speak before his own fear did. Ranger's head lifted. His ears turned. His nose pointed into the storm. "What is it?" Kane asked, but he already knew the answer could be anything: a crevasse, a rock, a person, or something worse. Ranger's collar light pulsed in a pattern that meant only one thing: human. Kane's heart tightened. "How far?" Ranger moved forward, slow at first, then faster, pulling the line. Kane followed without question. He checked his weapon out of habit, though he did not expect enemies. Out here, the storm was the only enemy that mattered. Ranger led him along a slight slope, then down into a shallow dip. The wind shifted again. For a moment, the snow thinned, and Kane saw something dark against the white, a human shape. Myra did not notice them at first. She was kneeling behind the ice rise, bent over the puppies like she could block the wind with her body. Her shoulders shook. The storm pulled at her hair inside the helmet. Her hands, tight around the puppies, trembled. Kane approached carefully, lowering his posture so he did not look like a threat. Ranger moved ahead, calm and steady. The dog's presence was like a line of order in chaos. Myra looked up suddenly when Ranger's shadow crossed her light. Her eyes widened. For a second, she did not understand what she was seeing. In the storm, a big dog could look like a wolf, and a soldier in armor could look like anything. Then she saw the human posture, the careful movement, the way Kane held his hands open. "Hey," Kane called, voice strong even through the wind. "You're not alone, I'm here." Mara tried to speak, but her throat locked. She could only stare. Her tears floated in her visor, catching light like tiny stars. Kane crouched near her, keeping a safe space. "Name." "Mara," she managed. "Mara Hale. Lucas Kane, Navy Rescue." He pointed at Ranger. "This is Ranger. He found you." The brown puppy lifted its head and stared at Ranger with wide eyes. The gray-white puppy made a small sound, half fear and half relief, like it was not sure if it was allowed to hope. Myra swallowed. I got lost. My station." Her voice broke. She looked down at the puppies again as if ashamed. "I couldn't leave them." Kane's gaze went to the puppies. He saw the way Mara held them, the way she had wrapped her coat around them instead of saving that heat for herself. He understood that kind of choice. Soldiers made it. Parents made it. Good people made it. "You did right," he said. Mara blinked hard as if she thought she had misheard. "What? You did right," Kane repeated, simple and firm. "We move now. Storm's getting worse." Mara tried to stand, but her legs wobbled. Kane reached out and took her elbow, steadying her without pulling too hard. Ranger stepped closer, offering his body as a windbreak. Kane scanned the whiteout. "Where were you headed?" "The main dome," Mara said. "But my compass, everything's wrong." Kane nodded. "Storm interference." "Same problem we have." He hesitated for a fraction of a second, then made the decision. "My shuttle went down. Pilot's alive. I set a shelter. We go there first, warm up, then we move when we can." Mara looked past him as if she could see the wreck through the storm. "There's a shelter. Temporary," Kane said. "Better than dying out here." Mara's shoulders sagged with relief so strong it almost looked like pain. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." Kane adjusted his pack and looked at the puppies again. "Can you carry them the whole way?" Mara tightened her arms. "Yes." Kane nodded, accepting her answer. He did not argue with someone who had already proven she would rather freeze than let go. Ranger turned, ready to lead them back. Kane clipped Mara into the line system, making sure she would not drift away if the wind shoved her. He checked her suit seals with quick, practiced movements. "You stay close," he told her. "If you fall, don't fight the storm. Let the line hold you. Keep breathing." Mara nodded, eyes fixed on him, trusting him because she had nothing else left. They began to move. The storm hit them harder now, as if angry that its prey was escaping. Snow rushed around their legs. The wind screamed over the ice. Kane walked behind Mara and to her side, guarding her from the worst gusts. Ranger pulled ahead, never rushing too fast, always checking back. Mara stumbled once, almost falling. Kane caught her with one hand and pushed her upright. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "Don't waste breath," Kane replied. "Just move." She nodded and kept moving. The puppies stayed quiet, but Mara could feel their warmth fading. She pressed them tighter to her chest, and her mind begged the universe for one small mercy. As they climbed the slope toward where Kane had left the shuttle, Ranger's sensors clicked again. He paused, head tilted, as if listening to something deep under the snow. Kane noticed immediately. "Ranger!" The dog did not show fear, it was something else. Confusion, maybe. "Alertness, what is it?" Kane asked again, slower this time. Ranger's harness light pulsed, human signals still present, but now there was another pattern underneath it, faint and strange. Not animal, not machine the way human machines felt. Mara saw Kane's posture change. She felt it like a warning in the air. "Lucas," she said, voice thin. "What's wrong?" Kane stared into the white ground ahead, eyes narrowing behind his visor. "I don't know," he admitted, "but Ranger's picking up something under the ice." The wind howled, the snow shifted. For half a second, the ground seemed to vibrate, like a deep breath taken by something sleeping far below. Mara's grip tightened around the puppies. The brown one whined softly. The gray-white one went still. Kane raised his head and looked toward the direction of the shuttle, then back to the snow beneath their feet. "Keep moving," he ordered, calm but sharp. "Whatever it is, we don't stop here." Kane kept his eyes forward and his steps steady, but every part of him was listening for another sign from Ranger or the ice beneath their boots. The shuttle came into view slowly, like a dark shape growing out of the storm. Its broken wing pointed upward, half buried in snow, and the beacon light blinked weakly from the top. It looked small and fragile against the endless white, but to Mara it looked like a castle made of fire and warmth. Kane guided her toward the thermal shelter he had set up near the shuttle's side. It was a low, dome-shaped structure made of emergency fabric and energy mesh. Snow slid off its curved surface instead of piling up. Kane opened the entrance and waved Mara inside. Warm air rushed over her face and hands. She gasped at the sudden change. Her legs almost gave out again, but this time from relief instead of cold. Kane followed her in and sealed the entrance behind them. The storm's scream faded into a dull roar outside. Ranger shook snow from his fur and lay down near the door, alert but calm. The pilot lay on a padded mat near the back of the shelter, wrapped in silver thermal sheets. His chest rose and fell in slow, shallow breaths. Mara carefully knelt and sat down, still holding the puppies. She opened her coat just enough to check them. Their noses were cold, but their bodies were still warm. The gray-white one blinked up at her and licked her glove with a tiny, rough tongue. Myra laughed once, a short, broken sound that surprised even her. It felt strange to laugh in a place like this. Kane watched her for a moment, then turned his attention to the pilot. He checked the man's pulse, his breathing, and the small monitor clipped to his collar. The readings were low but stable. "He'll make it for now," Kane said. "We just need the storm to ease so we can signal for pickup." Mara nodded, though she was not sure if she believed storms like this ever truly ended. Kane moved to a storage pack and pulled out a heat pad. He handed it to Mara. "Put this around them. It'll help keep their temperature steady." She took it carefully and wrapped it around the puppies. "Thank you." Kane sat back on his heels and took off his helmet. His face was tired, marked by cold and wind, but his eyes were steady. He looked at Mara more closely now, not just as a person he had found in the storm, but as someone who had survived it. "You're a scientist?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "Xenobiology. I work with colony rescue systems, animals mostly." Kane nodded toward the puppies. "These are part of that?" Mara hesitated, then nodded. "They're designed to help find people in dangerous environments. Cold worlds, toxic air, places humans can't go easily. They're still young. I wasn't supposed to bring them out yet." "They did okay," Kane said. Mara smiled weakly. "They did better than I did." Ranger lifted his head at the sound of their voices and walked over to the puppies. He lowered his nose and sniffed them gently. The brown puppy sniffed back, then reached out with one paw and touched Ranger's leg. Ranger stayed very still, as if he understood how small and fragile it was. Kane watched the dogs with a faint, tired smile. For a few minutes, the shelter was quiet except for the sound of the wind outside and the soft breathing of the pilot. The warmth slowly returned to Myra's fingers and toes. She did not realize how cold she had been until the pain of warming up started, sharp and burning. Then Ranger's harness light pulsed again. Kane's head snapped up. "What is it, boy?" Ranger walked to the side of the shelter and pressed his nose against the fabric wall. His ears were forward. His body was tense but not afraid, curious. Mara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. "Is it that thing again?" she asked quietly. "Maybe," Kane said. He stood and pulled his helmet back on. He checked his weapon and moved to the shelter's edge. He did not open it, but he placed his hand on the seal, ready. Ranger let out a low sound, not a growl, but something deeper, like a warning meant for the ground itself. The snow outside shifted. Mara held the puppies closer. She could feel their tiny hearts beating fast against her chest. Kane activated a small scanner on his wrist and held it near the wall. The screen flickered, then showed strange lines and shapes. There were heat patterns under the ice, wide and slow, like something very large breathing in its sleep. "That's not a person," Kane muttered. The ground trembled again, stronger this time. Snow slid off the shuttle's wing in a soft avalanche. Myra's voice shook. "What is it?" "I don't know," Kane said, "but I don't like being on top of it." Ranger suddenly backed away from the wall and moved between Myra and the shelter's entrance. His body was tense now, ready to move. The tremble stopped. For a long moment, nothing happened. Kane did not relax. Neither did Ranger. Then, without warning, a shape rose from the snow about 20 meters away. It was not an animal. It was not a machine in any way Mara recognized. It looked like a tall, curved frame made of dark stone and metal, with glowing lines running along its surface like veins of blue light. Its movement was slow but powerful, as if the ice itself was lifting it up. Myra gasped. That's not possible." Kane's hand tightened on his weapon. He stepped in front of her without thinking. More shapes began to rise. 2, then 3, then more, forming a wide circle around the shelter and the shuttle. They were tall, taller than any human, and they moved with silent purpose. Ranger did not bark. He stood, ears flat, eyes locked on the nearest one. The storm seemed to quiet, as if even the wind was watching. One of the shapes turned its upper frame toward the shelter. A beam of soft blue light swept across the snow, then over the shuttle, then over the shelter itself. When it passed over Kane, he felt a strange warmth, not heat, but a feeling like being seen. Myra held her breath. The light moved to her. The puppies began to glow. It was faint at first, just a soft shimmer in their fur like moonlight caught in ice. Then it grew brighter, blue and white, matching the lines on the tall shapes. Myra stared in shock. "No, that can't be." Ranger stepped back, surprised by the sudden light, but he did not retreat. He watched closely. The nearest shape stopped moving. The blue lines along its body pulsed faster, like a heartbeat. Myra's mind raced. She remembered the secret files, the extra funding that had come from nowhere, the strange requests to include certain materials in the puppy's genetic design. She had thought it was just advanced technology, just another layer of human planning. But now she was not so sure. Kane glanced back at her. "Mara, what did you make?" "I didn't," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I knew. I thought it was just for search and rescue." The brown puppy wriggled in her arms and looked at the tall shape. It let out a small bark, thin and brave. The sound echoed strangely in the quiet. The tall shape responded. A soft tone filled the air, low and deep like a distant bell underwater. The blue lines along its body glowed brighter. The beam of light shifted and focused on the puppies. Mara felt something change inside her head. Not a voice exactly, but a feeling like a door opening. Images flashed in her mind. Ice fields, stars, long, empty skies, shapes like these guardians standing alone on frozen worlds waiting. "They're not attacking," she said slowly. "They're scanning, they're trying to understand." Kane did not lower his weapon. "Understand what?" "Us," Mara said. "Or maybe them." She looked down at the puppies. "I think the puppies are a bridge, a way to talk." The ground beneath them hummed, a low vibration that made the snow dance. Ranger moved closer to Kane, staying at his side. The tall shapes began to move again, but not toward them. They shifted into a wider circle, forming a pattern in the snow, like a symbol drawn around the shelter. Myra stood slowly, careful not to make sudden movements. Kane watched her closely, but did not stop her. "I think they won't hurt us," she said. "Not if we don't act like a threat." Kane hesitated. Every part of his training told him to be ready to fight. Another part of him, quieter but just as strong, told him to listen. He lowered his weapon slightly. The puppy's glow grew steady, no longer flickering. The gray-white one lifted its head and made a soft, curious sound, like a question. The tall shape nearest them lowered its upper frame, bending in a way that almost looked like a bow. Myra felt tears in her eyes again, but this time they were not from fear. "They've been here a long time," she said, more to herself than to Kane. "Waiting for someone who wouldn't just take this world, someone who would protect life on it." Kane looked at the circle of glowing giants in the snow, at the small puppies in Myra's arms, and at Ranger, steady and brave at his side. "Figures," he muttered. "We land on a frozen rock and it turns out to be someone else's home." The storm began to fade just a little. The wind dropped from a scream to a steady howl. The clouds above thinned enough for a pale light to shine through. Ranger's harness light changed pattern. The human signal was still there. The pilot, the beacon, Kane tapped his wrist. The scanner flickered, then showed a weak return signal far above. Something was answering the beacon. "Rescue is coming," he said. Myra let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding. The tall shapes slowly turned away from the shelter, their blue lines dimming. One by one, they lowered themselves back into the ice, leaving behind smooth, glowing marks in the snow that faded like footprints in water. The ground went still. The storm eased further, as if the world itself had decided to give them a moment of peace. Kane knelt and checked the pilot again. The man stirred, coughing softly. Myra sat back down, holding the puppies close. They no longer glowed, but they felt warm and alive in her arms. Ranger lay down near them, resting his head on his paws, eyes still open and watchful. Myra looked at Kane. "Do you think anyone will believe us?" Kane shrugged. "Doesn't matter, we were here, we saw it." Myra smiled, tired but real. Outside, the first clear light in hours touched the snow, turning the frozen world into a field of silver. The storm did not return, but it did not fully leave either. It rested over the land like a tired animal, breathing slowly, sending soft waves of snow across the wide frozen plain. The sky stayed pale and gray, but light now reached the ground in a gentle way instead of a violent one. The rescue signal grew stronger. High above, a small transport ship broke through the clouds, its engines glowing like falling stars. Kane saw it first and pointed upward. "There," he said. Myra followed his gaze. Her heart lifted at the sight of the ship, but part of her also felt a strange sadness. The quiet moment, the stillness after the Guardians had gone back into the ice, felt important. Like something had ended and something else had just begun. The ship circled once, then lowered carefully. Its landing thrusters pushed snow outward in wide rings. The ground shook lightly as it touched down near the shuttle wreck. Two rescue workers stepped out, wrapped in heavy suits. They moved quickly and with purpose, heading toward the shelter. Kane raised a hand. "Over here." They helped him move the pilot onto a stretcher. The man was awake now, weak but aware, eyes wide as he looked around at the frozen world and the strange, glowing marks still faintly visible in the snow. "What happened?" the pilot asked. Kane answered simply, "We crashed. We got lucky." The rescue workers did not question it. They were focused on their job, on getting people safe and warm. They ushered Kane and Mara toward the transport ship. Mara hesitated for a moment and looked back at the empty field where the tall shapes had risen from the ice. The snow there was smooth again, as if nothing had ever been there at all. Ranger nudged her leg gently, reminding her to move. She followed Kane up the ramp and into the warm light of the ship. Inside, the air was clean and hot. The puppies stirred in her arms, making small sounds as the cold left their bodies. A medic wrapped a blanket around Mara's shoulders and checked her hands and face for frostbite. Another medic took Kane aside to look at a cut on his cheek that he had not even noticed. The transport ship lifted off, leaving the frozen plane behind. They were taken back to the main colony dome, a wide, strong structure built from thick metal and clear panels. Inside, life moved quickly and loudly. People walked in groups, machines rolled past, lights blinked and glowed. It felt like another world after the quiet of the storm. Myra was given a small room near the medical wing. The puppies were placed in a warm enclosure with soft padding and gentle lights. A colony vet came to check them, amazed at their condition. "They're strong little ones," the vet said, "stronger than most." Mara smiled but did not explain why. Kane was taken to a security office for a report. He sat across from a colony officer who typed notes into a screen. "So," the officer said, "your shuttle went down, you set a shelter, and then what?" Kane thought about the tall shapes, the glowing lines, the puppies shining like small stars in the storm. "Then we found a scientist and 2 dogs," he said, "and we waited for rescue." The officer raised an eyebrow. "That's it." "That's it," Kane replied. The officer stared at him for a moment, then shrugged. "Storms mess with sensors. People see strange things out there. I'm just glad you're alive." Kane nodded. He was glad, too. Later, he found Mara in the medical wing, sitting beside the puppies' enclosure. She was watching them sleep, their small chests rising and falling in slow, steady rhythms. "They're okay," she said when she saw him. "The vet says they're healthier than she expected." "Good," Kane said. He leaned against the wall beside her. "You okay?" Mara nodded. "Tired, confused, but okay." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the puppies. "Do you think the Guardians will stay quiet?" Mara asked. Kane thought about the way the tall shapes had lowered themselves back into the ice. "I think they're watching," he said. "Not just this world, maybe us." Myra hugged her arms around herself. "Then we need to be careful if they decide we're not worth trusting." Kane finished the thought. "Then we'll find out what happens when ancient machines stop being patient." Mara looked at him. "You're not scared?" "I am," Kane said. "I just don't let it drive." Mara smiled slightly. The next few days passed in a strange calm. The storm moved away from the colony, leaving behind clear skies and endless ice fields that sparkled under distant stars. The colony leaders held meetings behind closed doors. Scientists studied sensor data from the storm. Security teams were sent out to scan the area around the shuttle crash. They found nothing, no traces of the tall shapes, no strange energy readings, just ice, snow, and the broken shuttle. Mara was called into a research office on the 3rd day. A group of scientists and colony officials waited for her, their faces serious. "We've reviewed your project files," one of them said. "The rescue puppies, there are some parts we don't understand." Mara's stomach tightened. "What parts?" "There are genetic markers in their design that don't match any human technology," another scientist said. "They're similar to something we found in ancient ruins on other frozen worlds." Mara felt her breath catch. "Ruins? Old structures," the scientist said. "Buried under ice. We thought they were just leftovers from a long-gone alien species." Mara remembered the images in her mind, the Guardians standing alone on frozen planets waiting. "They're not leftovers," she said softly. "They're still here." The room went quiet. Kane stood near the back, arms crossed, watching her. He had been invited as a witness, though he had not said much. "What are you saying?" an official asked. "I think," Mara said carefully, "that my puppies are part of a system. A way for those Guardians to connect with living beings. Maybe they've been planting these markers in life across different worlds, waiting for a species that would care enough to notice." "That's a big claim," the official said. "I know," Mara replied, "but I saw them." They responded to the puppies. They didn't respond to weapons. They didn't respond to machines. They responded to life. The officials exchanged looks. Kane stepped forward. I don't know anything about genetics or ancient systems, but I know this. Whatever those things were, they had the power to crush us. They chose not to. One of the scientists leaned back in his chair. If this is true, it changes a lot about how we explore, about how we settle new worlds. Mara nodded. We can't just arrive and build and take. We have to listen first. The meeting ended without clear answers, but something had shifted. The colony leaders began sending messages to other human settlements, sharing what little they could without causing panic. The puppies were moved to a secure research area, but Mara was allowed to stay with them. Kane visited when he could, often bringing Ranger, who had become something like a silent guard for the small enclosure. One evening, as the colony lights dimmed to simulate night, the puppies woke and began to glow again. It was faint, soft, like a whisper of light. Mara noticed it first. She leaned forward, heart racing. Kane, she said. Look. Kane stood up slowly, Ranger's ears lifted. The glow grew stronger and the room's screens flickered. Mara felt that same door opening in her mind. Images came again, clearer this time. She saw stars not just as points of light but as paths, lines connecting worlds stretching across the dark. She saw other planets, some green, some red, some blue, all with hidden shapes beneath their surfaces. They're calling, she whispered. Kane frowned. Calling who? Us, Mara said. All of us. The puppies stood on unsteady legs and looked toward the large window that faced the sky. Their glow reflected on the glass. Ranger walked closer, curious but calm. He did not seem afraid of the light. Alarms did not sound. No systems failed. It was as if the colony itself was holding its breath. Myra reached out and placed her hand near the puppies, not touching them but close enough to feel the warmth of their light. I think they want us to come, she said. Not just to their world, to all of them. Kane stared out at the stars beyond the window. That's a big invitation, Mara nodded, and a big responsibility. Days later, a message was sent from Kestrel 9 to human space. It was careful, simple, and honest. It spoke of a storm, of a crash, of a soldier, a scientist, and 2 small rescue animals. It spoke of ancient systems that watched quietly and waited. It did not promise danger or safety. It only asked one question. What kind of species do we want to be when the universe is finally watching us back? Far beneath the ice of Kestrel 9, the Guardians listened. Across the stars, something old and patient began to turn its attention toward humanity. And on a quiet colony world, a Navy SEAL, a xenobiologist, a loyal K9, and 2 glowing puppies stood at the edge of something much larger than themselves, not with weapons raised, but with open eyes and steady hearts. The message from Kestrel 9 spread faster than anyone expected. At first, it moved quietly past between scientists, colony leaders, and exploration teams. Then it reached public channels. Stories appeared on screens across human space. A soldier and a scientist, a storm and a crash, 2 small puppies that glowed like stars. Some people laughed, some people argued, some people felt something deep and old wake up inside them. On Kestrel 9, life went on, but it felt different now. The frozen world no longer felt empty. Every stretch of ice, every quiet valley, every shadow under the snow seemed to hold a secret. Mara spent most of her days in the research wing, working with a small team that had been assigned to study the puppies. They ran gentle tests, careful not to hurt or stress them. The puppies did not like loud noises or sudden movements, but they were curious about people. They wagged their tails and followed voices. They seemed to understand more than they should. Kane continued his security work, but he was also asked to sit in on planning meetings. His experience on the ice gave weight to his words. When he spoke, people listened. Ranger stayed close to him, always calm, always alert. The other security dogs seemed to look at Ranger differently now, as if they sensed something special about him. One morning, Myra was watching the puppies play with a soft training ball when the room lights dimmed slightly. The screens on the walls flickered. Her heart skipped. She knew that feeling now. The puppies froze, then turned their heads toward the window. Their fur began to glow, slow and steady. Myra stood up. It's happening again. Kane was called within minutes. He arrived with Ranger, both moving fast but controlled. What do you see? Kane asked. They're reaching out, Myra said. I can feel it. It's stronger than before. The glow spread from the puppies to the floor beneath them, thin lines of light forming a pattern like a map. The room's air felt charged like before a storm. Myra's mind opened again. This time, the images were clearer. She saw Kestrel 9 from above, the ice fields stretching like a white ocean. Then the view pulled back farther and farther until she saw other worlds. Dozens of them, hundreds, all connected by faint lines of light. "They're showing us the network," she whispered. "A system of worlds they protect." Kane looked at the glowing map on the floor. "And what do they want from us?" Myra swallowed. "They want to know if we're willing to protect it too." The room door opened, and several colony leaders and scientists rushed in. They stopped when they saw the light. One of the leaders, a woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, stepped forward carefully. "Mara, can you communicate with them?" Mara shook her head. "Not with words, not like this. It's more like feeling, understanding." The leader nodded slowly. "Then we need to make a decision." Within hours, a secure link was opened to human command across multiple systems. Leaders, admirals, scientists, and explorers appeared on large screens in a wide circle. Myra stood in the center of the room, the puppies at her feet, glowing softly. Kane stood beside her, arms crossed, Ranger sitting at his side. Myra told the story again, from the storm to the Guardians to the network of worlds. She did not exaggerate. She did not hide her doubts. When she finished, the room was quiet. A man in a dark uniform spoke first. "You're asking us to trust an alien system we don't understand." Mara nodded. "Yes." Another voice came from a different screen. "You're asking us to change how we expand, how we claim new worlds." "Yes," Mara said again. A third leader leaned forward. "And what happens if we say no?" Mara hesitated. The images in her mind shifted. She saw the Guardians not moving, not attacking, just waiting. Waiting for a long time. "I don't think they'll stop us," she said slowly. "I think they'll just stop helping, they'll stop opening doors." Kane spoke up. "We've always believed the universe was something to conquer. Maybe this is our chance to prove we can do something better than that." The debate lasted hours. Some argued for caution, for weapons and defenses, for testing the Guardians' limits. Others argued for trust, for cooperation, for a new path. Through it all, the puppies stayed calm. Their light did not grow brighter or dimmer. It was steady, patient. Finally, the gray-haired leader spoke again. "We will send a team, not a fleet, not an army, a small group, scientists, diplomats, and security. We will go where the Guardians guide us and listen." Mara felt her chest tighten with relief. Kane exhaled slowly. "About time." The preparations began at once. A new ship was chosen, designed for exploration, not combat. Its weapon systems were powered down, left only for basic defense. Its hull was marked with symbols of peace used by human colonies. Mara was asked to join the mission as a lead scientist. Kane was assigned as head of security. Ranger, of course, went with him. The puppies were the center of everything. They were fitted with gentle harnesses that allowed their glow and signals to connect with the ship's systems. They seemed to understand what was happening. They stayed close to Myra and Kane, as if they knew this journey was meant for them too. On the day of departure, much of the colony gathered in the main dome. People stood in groups, watching the ship through the clear panels. Some looked hopeful, some looked afraid. Myra stood at the top of the ramp and looked back one last time at Kestrel 9. The frozen world had almost taken her life. It had also given her something bigger than she ever imagined. Kane stood beside her. "You ready?" Myra took a deep breath. "No, but I'm going anyway." Kane smiled. "That's usually how it works." They boarded the ship. The ramp closed. The engines hummed to life. As the ship lifted off, the puppies began to glow again, brighter than ever before. Lines of light spread across the ship's interior screens, forming a path through the stars. The ship followed. Space opened around them, dark and endless. The stars did not look like points of light now. They looked like doorways. The journey took days. Time felt strange inside the ship, stretched and folded by the path the Guardians had shown. Mara spent long hours studying the patterns of light. The puppies often slept near the main display, their glow steady and warm. Kane trained the small security team, running drills in low gravity. He kept his routines normal, grounded, as if that could anchor him to something solid in the middle of the unknown. Ranger stayed close, always watching the shifting lights on the screens, head tilted in quiet curiosity. Then, without warning, the stars changed. The darkness ahead filled with soft blue light. A massive shape appeared, not a single guardian, but a vast structure floating in space. It looked like a city made of stone and energy, wide and layered, with countless glowing lines running through it. Mara's breath caught. This is their center. The ship slowed on its own. The puppies stood up, their glow matching the light ahead. A gentle force pulled the ship forward, guiding it into a wide opening in the structure. The inside was calm, filled with light and quiet hums of energy. The ship settled onto a smooth platform, no weapons activated. No alarms sounded. Kane and his team moved into position, cautious but not aggressive. The ramp lowered. The air outside the ship was warm and clean, filled with a faint, pleasant scent like rain on stone. Mara stepped forward first, the puppies at her side. Kane followed, Ranger close. The space around them was wide and open, with tall pillars of light rising into a high, curved ceiling that looked like the inside of a glowing cave. Then the Guardians appeared. They rose from the floor and the walls, forming a circle around the humans. They were taller and brighter than before, their lines of light flowing like rivers. Myra felt the door in her mind open fully. This time the message was clear, not words, not images. A simple feeling shared between them. Welcome. Mara's eyes filled with tears. Kane stood still, heart pounding, but he did not raise his weapon. Ranger sat down calmly, tail resting on the smooth floor. The puppies walked forward, small and brave, their light shining like tiny suns in the vast space. One of the Guardians lowered itself, bending low, bringing its glowing lines close to the puppies. The feeling changed. Trust. Myra placed her hand over her chest. They're giving us a choice, she said softly, not just to visit, to join them. Kane looked around at the ancient structure, at the Guardians, at the stars beyond. Join them how? To help protect these worlds, Myra replied. To be part of the network, not as rulers. As caretakers. The human team stood in silence. Somewhere deep inside, something old in humanity stirred. The part that once looked at the sky and wondered instead of feared. The part that built ships not just to conquer, but to explore. Kane took a step forward. We're not perfect, he said, speaking out loud even though he wasn't sure they needed words. We make mistakes, we fight, we take, but we also protect. We stand up for each other, even in storms. Mara stepped beside him. We don't want to own the universe, she said. We want to belong in it. The Guardians' light pulsed, slow and bright. The space around them filled with warmth. The puppies barked softly, as if in agreement. The light did not fade when the Guardians pulsed. It spread. Soft waves of blue and white moved through the great structure like breath moving through a living body. The air felt warmer, kinder. The human team stood still, unsure if they should move, speak, or simply listen. Myra felt the connection deepen. The door in her mind did not close this time. It stayed open, gentle, and wide, like an open hand instead of a push. She saw more than worlds now. She saw stories. She saw a long past where the Guardians had been built by a species that loved life deeply, but knew they would not last forever. They had made the Guardians as their final gift to the universe, a promise that no world would ever be truly alone again. The Guardians did not rule. They watched, they waited. They helped only when someone was ready to help in return. That someone now was humanity. Myra took a slow step forward. The puppies stayed at her side, their light steady and warm. Kane followed, Ranger walking close to his leg, calm and brave. The Guardians did not move away. They opened their circle, making space. The human team entered the center of the vast chamber. Kane looked around, his soldiers' eyes taking in every detail, every angle, every possible threat. But he felt no danger here. He felt something else. A quiet weight, like standing in a place that had meaning far beyond him. Myra placed a hand on one of the glowing pillars. It felt solid, warm, like stone that remembered sunlight. They're showing us how to connect, she said softly. Not just with them, with each other. With every world in the network. A human scientist stepped forward, eyes wide. You mean travel, communication? Both, Myra replied. But more than that, understanding, they don't just open paths through space. They open paths through minds. The puppies sat down together and looked up at the nearest Guardian. Their tails wagged slowly. The Guardian lowered its tall frame again, not bowing but meeting them at their level. The feeling in the air changed. This time it was not just welcome, it was a question. Kane felt it even without Myra's connection. A pressure in his chest, gentle but firm, like someone asking him, not with words but with trust. Will you protect what you find? Kane thought of the storm, of Myra kneeling in the snow, holding two small lives against the cold. Of Ranger standing between her and the unknown without fear, of the pilot breathing under silver sheets in a shelter that might have failed at any moment. He stepped forward. "We will," he said. "We won't be perfect, but we will try every time." Mara felt the guardians respond. The light around them brightened, not blinding but strong. The chamber changed. The walls shifted, opening like the petals of a great flower. Beyond them, space appeared, not empty and dark, but filled with lines of light stretching in every direction. Each line led to a world. A voice not heard but felt moved through the room. "Then walk with us." The journey did not end there. It began. The human ship was guided back to the stars, not alone now, but as part of something larger. The guardians did not follow like guards. They followed like companions. Across human space, new signals began to appear, not warnings, not commands, invitations. Worlds that had once seemed dead showed signs of quiet life beneath their surfaces. Frozen planets warmed just enough for small plants to grow. Dark moons revealed hidden oceans under thick ice. The Guardians did not change these worlds for humans. They simply revealed what was already there. Human explorers changed too. Ships began to land more carefully. Colonies were built with space left untouched, wide areas of land marked as protected. Scientists and security teams worked together instead of apart. Kane became something new. He was still a soldier, still trained to fight when needed. But now he also trained people how to stand down, how to listen, how to protect without controlling. Ranger stayed at his side through it all, growing older but never slower in spirit. Other dogs were trained in the same way, not just for rescue, but for connection. They became symbols on many worlds, signs that humans had come not just to take, but to care. Mara became a guide between species and systems. She traveled with the puppies, who grew into strong, calm dogs that still glowed when the guardians were near. She taught humans how to feel the network, how to open their minds just enough to understand without losing themselves. The puppies were no longer just part of a project. They became the first of a new kind of bridge, living proof that small, gentle things could change the path of entire civilizations. Years passed. Kestrel 9 changed. It was still cold, still quiet, still wide and white. But now it was known as a place of beginnings. People came there not for resources, but for understanding. They stood on the ice and looked at the sky, thinking about what it meant to be part of something so large. One evening, long after the storm had become a story told to children, Myra and Kane stood together on a high platform overlooking the frozen plain. The stars were bright. The lines of the network were faint but visible, like soft threads in the dark. Ranger lay at their feet, older now, his muzzle touched with gray. One of the glowing dogs lay beside him, warm and steady. Myra smiled. "Do you ever miss how simple things were?" Kane thought for a moment. "Sometimes, but simple didn't mean easy." "It just meant we didn't know how much more there was." Mara nodded. "I used to think the universe was something to study, to measure, to label." "And now?" Kane asked. "And now," she said, "I think it's something to take care of." A soft light appeared in the distance. A guardian rose from the ice, not in alarm, but in greeting. Its glow was gentle, like a friend waving from far away. Kane raised a hand without thinking. The guardian's light pulsed once in return. Somewhere on another world, a human child held a small rescue dog and looked up at a strange, beautiful sky. Somewhere else, a ship landed on a quiet planet and built its first home with care instead of hurry. Humanity did not become rulers of the stars. They became something better. They became keepers.